Alright. Hopefully this will be the last part of this poster. I'm actually, I'm starting to get a little tired. It's 6:30 in the morning here, and I didn't sleep that much last night. I've been up since 2, and I decided I wanted to do something useful and make this poster with you guys. That way I can impart some of my infinite wisdom onto you, and, I wish. As I've said in past tutorials, or past videos really, this is more or less for my benefit than it is for you guys, because a lot of this stuff is pretty much common knowledge on YouTube. I'm actually thinking about maybe going back and whenever I start making posters in the future, kind of doing videos like this. If you guys have got any input that can help me out, it would be greatly appreciated, because 90% of the time I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't even know why you're watching this video, but please, since you're here, just keep watching, please. Alright. So we're pretty much done with this. Let me just look one more time just to make sure. This is the image that I originally made, and originally, I'll give you the history behind this. This was going to be a poster I made for another tutorial that I never got around to doing, and it was going to be talking about the medigun beam particle. And I had come to the realization that you could lock these particles to whatever you wanted to. So I was thinking, you know, you could actually take the particle and lock it to the minigun, and then have the heavy healing the medic. And it was like, I've got to make a poster of that. So that's where this came from. And I upload stuff to DeviantArt, so any posters that I make usually end up there. I try and put them in various other places too. But I'm not looking for a carbon copy of this one, obviously. It's not framed exactly the same way. If I wanted to, I could spend hours and hours and hours just sitting here silently working on this and working on it. It's a little bit different when I'm sitting here trying to describe stuff that I'm doing. There's a few tips and a few hints and tricks and all that good stuff that I figured out while I was making this one. And, okay, make sure that's up there. But, I like doing this. It's exercise for me, at least, to help reinforce some of the stuff that I'm doing. It helps me understand it better. Same thing for most of you guys. You're going to realize that it's easier to try and explain something to somebody. It helps reinforce what you've learned. And that's what I'm doing this for. So if you like it, and you want me to do more, please say so, and I will try and do more of them. I've gotten to where I'm doing more and more of these things in free time. So, alright, enough of that. Let's get this thing finished. So we've got the lights in here. I don't think I'm going to add anything else. I think it looks pretty good as it stands right now. I want his foot like that. I don't want to bring it down. I want to leave it like that because it looks cool. And I'll just leave it at that. It looks cool. Alright. So the lights are in place. The particles are in place. The next thing we're going to do is get it ready to lay off. Now I'm going to go ahead and forewarn you guys. My SFM, my computer can handle this once I start putting ambient occlusion and everything off. The whole time I've been doing this tutorial, I keep ambient occlusion off. I keep it off in general until right before I'm ready to start rendering. The reason is because I don't like the frame rate drop. I will warn you guys right now, my frame rate is probably going to drop a little bit because the graphics card that I'm using isn't the greatest one in the world. It's getting a little dated. It does good for games, but rendering stuff like this is very taxing on your graphics. So the frame rate may drop a little bit. It's already starting to drop some now that I've got these lights and everything in it. So just fair warning. What I'm going to do is something that I usually do. The lights first, I'll put the volumetrics in, and the very last thing that I do is put the ambient occlusion on. So this first light right here, I'm going to make a volumetric. Let's go in here and just enable volumetrics. It won't show up at first, so just gonna scrub to the playhead a little bit, and now it is. And it actually looks pretty good, so I'm gonna pretty much leave it alone. The only reason I put volumetrics in here is just to kind of make a little smoky effect. I'm not going to do anything else to it. I'm just going to leave it alone. It actually rendered pretty good. Usually you'll get artifacts here from where the actual light, it's casting shadows, it's not going past. This doesn't look too bad, so I'm going to leave it alone. Alright, so that's done. The next step is going to be ambient occlusion. Now, a lot of people don't understand this. I'm one of them. Ambient occlusion will actually, it's based off your models, it's not based off the light. It is a way of enhancing the shadows that you see on a model. So let's go ahead and turn it on. Go into the render settings. I'm going to turn on ambient occlusion, and you can do some different things with it. You can show outline only, which, if those of you that are familiar with Borderlands, you're going to recognize this, because that's what it looks like. It looks like something out of Borderlands. You're only seeing the outline. If I go in here to render, you're seeing sort of a cartoon shading effect on all these models. Okay, let's go up in here, and AO and outline, you can do that. We're just going to worry about AO only. And I'm also going to check this box that says show ambient occlusion. What that does is it whites out everything. So now I'm only seeing the characters and no light. This is how I always set mine up. So it's up to you whether you use it or not. You can actually see some of the rendering on it. If I'm not mistaken, the Valve developer community for the Source Filmmaker says that ambient occlusion will not effectively render if you're not using at least 64 samples. So what we'll do is we'll go back up into the render setting here and see depth of field. If you don't have this set to at least, it's either 32 or 64, and I think it's 64. If you don't have it set to at least 64, when it comes out to render, it will look grainy. And here, use camera settings. See how it looks grainy? It's not really clear. You might have a hard time seeing it in this, but there's little grains in here, and it looks fuzzy. So if I go in and change this to 64, you may not notice it as much, but see how much clearer and how much sharper this image looks? That's effective ambient occlusion. So if I go in here and I turn off where it'll actually render it out for me, give it a second here, you can see there's still a little bit of fuzz here, and just kind of getting up close to it. There's a little bit back here. It's still rendering it in passes. It doesn't look too bad. So we're going to go back and we're going to turn it on. And for pictures, I usually end up doing all the way here, like 1024 and 256. And what you're going to notice is it's going to take a freaking long time for it to render out. Well, it didn't take too long. That's good. It will whenever I can actually see everything. So this is how it would look if you just rendered AO. And you can render it like this. You can render a movie like this. It's completely AO where you only see black and white. We're going to go back into here. Now notice this is grainy when it's in the motion editor, and once it makes its passes, by the way, whenever you change the depth of field and the motion blur, you're actually changing the number of samples that it takes out of this. So for right now, it's taking a lot, and it makes it more accurate. You can choose whatever you want to for it, but I want high quality whenever I make these. So it was very clear in there, and it's very grainy right here, and that's because this is not rendering it out. It's not doing that in the motion editor because you're going to be working in the motion editor. If it was rendering it out, unless you had a really powerful computer, it would be lagging like crazy. So what we're going to do is I'm going to change the camera settings. I'm going to make this, it looks good from this view. Once it reloads again, it looks good. It's got nice shading qualities to it, but you're losing a lot of stuff. Come on, come on, come on. That's what I mean. My graphics is not that great. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Oh, me. There it goes. Alright. You're still losing a lot of stuff. You're losing a little bit of the coat here. You're losing a little bit of the minigun, his leg, his shoulder, some of the stuff. You're also losing a little bit of stuff in the background here. You can change that. We're going to go in here. We've got the camera selected. I'm going to go down here to these things right here where it says SSAO bias, SSAOS strength, or SSAO strength, and SSAO radius. And these are all the ambient occlusion controls. I forget what SS stands for, but AO is ambient occlusion. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring the bias up. And you'll notice that it's starting to change. It's almost like changing where it's interpreting it. It's almost like you're changing the focus of a camera, which we've got to do, by the way, which is something else. I always forget to change the focus on the camera. But yeah, it's almost like changing the focus of the camera. It's changing where it's centering the ambient occlusion. And what I'm looking for is I will drag this slider until, if you drag it all the way off, weird things start to happen. You start to see the actual folds of the model. They don't get smoothed anymore. It looks bad like that, so you have to bring it a little bit off of it. But what I'm looking for is I will drag the slider until I see a point where most of the stuff that I want to emphasize is covered, which is probably going to be pretty close to the default on this one, maybe up just a little bit, something like that. And the SSO strength will actually enhance a lot of the stuff that I have selected. So you bring this up to choose where you want it to be, and notice how it's more noticeable now that I've got that turned up. And see how these shadows are moving about. What I'm looking for is I want as much as possible. And same thing, kind of go back in here and pick a point which I'm thinking is probably going to be somewhere around in here. There's a point where you can go to, where you get to where you're not making any difference, which say halfway here. I can keep going and it's really not making that much difference. So I only go as far as I need to and then stop, because anything past that you're not really making any benefit. Now what the radius does is, see these fuzzy areas right here, that actually cleans them up. So I'm going to start dragging the radius down and see how the outlines start becoming a lot sharper and you start losing some of the shadow right there. That's important because it gives more detail to the stuff that you're doing. It's like if I took the radius down, once this got rendered, which I can render it real quick, what'll happen is a lot of these areas will start getting diffused because you've got so much shadow. That's not too bad, but whenever, let's see, let's turn off that for a second. Let's see how this looks. I'm not really worried about a lot of the stuff up in here, but come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. I do know that if you turn the radius down more, these lines, these curves and all, they become a lot sharper, and it gives so much depth to these things. It's unreal, because I've made posters in the past where you look at the model and they look so real. See how much better this looks right now? We're going to go back in and I'm going to change it a little bit more. I want to do this. I'm going to drag the radius down. I want to make these guys a little bit sharper. Something about like that. And if it will, there we go. See how much clearer these things look? They pop out a lot better. So I'm going to leave that there. I'm actually going to go back up here and I'm going to turn off ambient occlusion for a second, because I'm going to do some more work. Alright, one of the other things that you need to be familiar with doing, and we're pretty much done with that right now, is I'm going to adjust the focal distance of the camera. I've got the camera set up pretty much where I want it. I'm going to click on this slider and I'm going to drag it. Now this used to be the F key, and they removed it. I gotta remap the slider. Come on. Take this up to 300. I think it'll get me there. And just kind of drag it on out. And what I'm looking for is I actually want the medic to be the focus. So I'm going to come back. And I want a little bit on the heavy here. Not much, because I want the medic to be in focus and I want the heavy to start being out of it. So focal distance and aperture work hand in hand. If you turn the aperture up, it starts making the background fuzzy. So we're going to go back over here and render that out. And actually, let me do this. Let me just use the camera settings here for a second so that way it doesn't take so long. But see how he's starting to become a little fuzzy? Let's go back over here. I can turn this all the way up, and then you'll really see it. See how everything back here is starting to become fuzzy? Even the medic's becoming fuzzy because he's past the focal point. Let's bring it back then. About right there. That's probably too much aperture, but it also makes it look like he's moving, but that's too much. Bring it up about a quarter. I don't want too much fuzz because it doesn't look right. A little bit's fine, too much is too much. That's why we call it too much. It'd probably look good if it come up to half. That's too much. Let's split the difference and come up to right here. About a third. And that looks pretty good. So now we'll just go in and add the ambient occlusion. And that looks pretty good. And we'll go ahead and adjust the camera settings and move that up to 1024 and 256 so that it looks really good. It just takes forever to render out. And I think if it'll come on, once it renders itself out, it's done. And there we go. There it is. And that's it. It looks pretty good. It's not as good as the original, but as I said in the beginning, I wasn't seeking to make a carbon copy of this, although this does look pretty good. This is the new one. So I hope you liked all this stuff, and like I said earlier, if you want me to make more, I will make some more of them. So if you're ready to export it, I'm just going to export you can export an image if you want to. I usually do posters. Let's see, let's do poster, and yeah, go ahead and save it. I usually export everything as a PNG, and I do 1080 because I can handle 1080. Because I have, because I'm doing so many samples, it usually takes about 5-10 minutes to render this thing out, just because there's so many tiles that it has to go through. But yeah, I may put this up on DeviantArt. I'm not sure. If I do, I'll link it down in the description. So that's pretty much it. And if I make more of these in the future, I will be sure to let you guys know. So that's it. So long, everybody.